Right on. So yeah, our participation incentive is the beanie. Yeah, if you get 10 points, you'll get the beanie. It's pretty straightforward. If you have any questions, please come back to me. Yeah, agenda. So announcements, we'll have John talk and then we'll have Dr. Loomis talk. So just a reminder, our vision to foster productive, informed, and morally sound students at Purdue interested in healthcare careers. If you feel that we are not meeting the vision of the club, if you want to add something to add to the make sure that this vision is possible, please ask us. We're open to suggestions. We're open to having anything that you guys want for the organization. So healthcare journal club. So that's we've had our first one a couple weeks ago. We'll have our next one on October 15th. So if you're interested in learning more about research, getting skills in literature, join the journal club. It's a fun time. Just talk about research. Peer mentoring. We have a schedule change. So Ty, you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, in case you guys were not either at the last meeting or if you haven't seen the email that I just sent out earlier today, we will be changing the dates of the next sessions. So originally they were going to be next week, but we bumped it back because I believe there's a lot of issues with exams and stuff like that. So just the next two sessions will be October 12th and October 13th. The session 1 and session 2 are dictated by what is in the Excel spreadsheet that I sent out a couple weeks ago. If you have any questions, just let me know and I can help figure that stuff out. But yeah, and also both of those sessions are in this room. So we'll be right back here at 7 in 2 weeks.
Sick. Thanks, Ty. So we said a lot of events in the last general email. If you're not already signed up for these events, this is an amazing opportunity to do so. So the first one is Narcan training. It's going to be on Saturday. I believe they have a session from 12 to 2. It's already filled up, and then 2 to 4 that is still open. So there's still a couple spots there. Make sure to take advantage of those. We also have a Stop the Bleed training. I believe there's a couple spots for those. Join us for the Stop the Bleed training and Narcan training. Yes, question.
Yeah.
Points tracker. Sorry, there's a lot of QR codes. It gets mixed up.
So if you want to sign up for it, we'll put it up at the end of the meeting.
Sorry about that. Another event, we have 2 food pantry volunteering events. So right now, we are still piloting this. We want to make this longitudinal. We want to make this so that you can go every single week. Food Finders has been happening. We've had more consistency with it. So yeah, the more people that are interested in signed up, the more spots we can potentially fill, and the longer term we can do this. So if you want to have some volunteering experience for long term, sign up for these things. And the Ace Food Pantry, it's super easy. It's on campus. So if you have the time to do Ace Food Pantry, the 12 to 2 Thursday, definitely do it. It's a good time. Cool. And then a lot of our members are going to be volunteering at the vaccine clinic on Wednesday. This is the registration code for getting actually getting your vaccines. So if you don't already have your flu vaccines, I believe they are also giving out HPV and meningitis. Get your vaccines. It's free. So there's no, yeah.
You're volunteering for the
I think you can register for like a time slot next to your volunteering slot. I think you still have to register online though. Sorry, we're just throwing QR codes at you. Yeah, if you guys want me to revisit them, just come up after the meeting. Sick. Yeah, upcoming announcements. We mentioned these before, but the project fund, we're still offering that. Well, actually, I said project fund twice. So scholarships. So this test prep scholarships. There are 2 scholarships, totaling $400. We're talking about opening it up to more, to having more of those scholarships. So once we send that out, be sure to take advantage of applying to those. And for the project fund, it's $250 to start your own organization. If you have an organization that you want to start or a community service project that you want to complete, we'll send out details about what we want from those proposals. But yeah, another announcement will be sent out for those. But without further ado, we have John here to talk about his experience in medical school. John is a year 4 medical student, and he's on an MD MBA track, which means he's also going to get his master's in business from IU School of Medicine or an affiliated university. So John, please come up. Thanks so much for coming.
All right. I'm John. I do not have a QR code, so don't worry. I'm not want to talk about myself too much, but I am a proud Purdue alum, class of 2018. So not that long ago, I was listening to speeches myself, and now I'm up here giving one, which is kind of weird. My resume is not like Dr. Loomis. This was neurosurgeon, so like I said, I'm not going to stack up there. But I think things that I wish I would have known when I was 18, 19, 20, 21 years old, starting college and, getting ready to apply. I think the biggest thing was I didn't probably get enough opinions. You're going to listen to me for 15 minutes, 20 minutes, talk about, what I think you should do or what I think is best or what works for me. But notice I'm saying what worked for me, not what works for you, your friends. They say the opinion is like, you're the average of the 5 closest people around you. I think the same thing is true when you're getting ready to apply to medical school or residency, right? If you only have one opinion in your ear and you're listening to only that one opinion, that application kind of becomes that person's and not your own. So the one thing I wish I would have done when I was, in undergrad was I wish I would have gotten more opinions. You could hear me say one thing and it could totally be wrong for you. Dr. Loomis might disagree with me on what my opinions are. That's why I think, it's important to go to as many talks as possible, reach out to alum, people in clubs, things like that, talk to them, get as many opinions as possible. Because if I've learned one thing, it's that not one person has all the answers on how to get in. There's definitely some variability here. Not everyone really knows everything about it. So I would say, take what I have to say, think about it, and then ask someone else. I'll take the time to also say, if you want some more, one-on-one, private mentoring, more private questions. I am part of an organization now involved in medical school. It's called Prescribe It Forward. It pairs medical students getting ready to graduate, people like me, 3rd, 4th years, and maybe some interns with undergrad students pre-meds. And you have a one-on-one mentorship with them. So like I got a couple mentees and I have their numbers and we talk and they can ask me more private questions that can be, more specific to the MCAT or, to their application, maybe read over the personal statements. So I'll take the time, something like that. It's great. If you want more one-on-one, definitely it's an organization. It's free. So you don't have to worry about anything. All the things are taken care of. It's all volunteer. So definitely something to think about, as you're going through this. I'm not gonna lie, medical school has been tough. Now that I'm submitting my residency applications in less than 48 hours. I've definitely starting to show signs of aging. I'm finding some gray hairs once in a while, which is not great, but it's been tough. It goes very up and down. I would say medical school and undergrad are similar but different. It's similar in the fact that, you have a class and, you go to class and you have tests. It's a lot different in that the only thing you do is school. I remember in undergrad, I had 2 jobs. I did research. I took 15, 16 credit hours a semester, like most people. I was a tour guide, I was a BGRTL. I had a lot of extracurricular activities. I volunteered. So if you were to sum all those hours, I had a lot going on. Just take all those hours and then just do school. And that's what I feel like medical school is like. You're just as busy as you are in undergrad, except your time's not split. Your time is pretty much, Dr. Loomis.
I didn't really want to cover this again.
Like I said, it's about, you're 100% of the time, just school, right? No one works, no one has a job. You don't really have a lot of extracurriculars. You have a couple things here and there, but you're not doing 20 hours of research a week in the lab. Maybe once in a while if you find some genius, which I'm not, you can find someone who does that. But I think that's the biggest change is having to be school is your job at that point, right? Now, as a third, fourth year, you leave the books, you go to the hospitals, you go to the clinics, you spend, maybe you're from 35 to sometimes 50, 55 hours a week, in the hospital, in the clinic, and then you go home and maybe study for your shelf exam during third year. Or I got the easiest portion of med school now. I got all my exams done. I got my board exams done. The hardest part's over. But, when I was a third year and I hadn't done all that, I'd go home. I might work on internal medicine. There are some days I'd get to the hospital at 6:30. And then, you don't leave until 8 o'clock. And then, you have to go home and, you're tired, you gotta change all your scrubs and you gotta probably make dinner, eat dinner. If you have a family, which some people do, you probably want to see them, see girlfriend, wife, husband. And then it's expected that you'll probably do something that night, whether that be 100 flashcards, 200 flashcards, 20, 30 UWorld practice questions. You're probably doing that. And then that takes you to probably 12:30 at night. And you probably wake up and do the same thing over again. On surgery, which usually has pretty long hours, as a third year, I had a month of peds surgery at Riley, and I was getting to the hospital at 5 a.m., which meant I was waking up at 4 every day, rolling at 5, and usually sign out was at 4:30. And then it's the same deal, right? You just work 12 hours and you probably were standing a lot of the time if you're in a surgery. And then you got to go home and you're tired, your legs hurt, and then you probably have to do, 40, 50, 60 practice questions. And then you do that, again. The thing is that it doesn't stay bad. There are sometimes, my phrase I always live by is, if you find yourself in hell, like, don't stop, just keep running. You'll eventually find your way out of it. The worst thing you can do probably, and I've been guilty of this, is why I know it, is, if you get, you get the fear, the anxiety, you kind of freeze up. You don't want to do anything. You don't want to look at your email. You don't want to pull up, your UWorld. You don't want to pull up all the questions you're going to miss, and you're going to have to see it in front of your face. That's probably the worst thing you can do. Just keep going is probably the best thing. After I kind of got over that fear, that anxiety, that's sort of in the back of my head, I'm not good enough, I'm not, I don't stack up to my classmates, they're way better than me, they're scoring way better than me. Once you get kind of past that and kind of just, you swallow that and realize, it's kind of an illusion a lot of times, right? Once you get past that, then you can really fly. I really feel like the fear takes hold of a lot of people, and it did to me. And then once I got over that, once you kind of get over that, that fear, the anxiety of, man, I'm going to do 40 UWorld questions. I'm going to watch all the red X's just keep popping up, right? I just kind of embraced that and said, all right, screw it. If I go over 40, I go over 40. The good thing is I probably just learned 40 new questions instead of, being like, wow, I missed 40 questions. I'm dumb. I would say at the end of the night, wow, I just missed 40 questions. I just learned 40 questions. And now when I take the exam, I'm not going to miss them. That's way better than just going to bed at night and saying, oh, I'll do this in the morning. Because at that point, you don't improve, right? No one improves by getting everything right. You probably improve by getting things wrong. I would say I probably learned more from the losses than the wins. I really feel like the things you remember the most are the things that, you were wrong on in clinic. If you're on rounds or a doctor asks you a question, you get it wrong and they give you the right answer. I feel like that's the stuff I never forget. That's the stuff that always sticks with you and it sticks best. So I would say get ready to embrace being wrong. It's very different because I feel like a lot of med students, and you just look at the stats, you're going to take 200 to 300 people who've never been bad at anything in their whole entire lives, right? I never struggled. I was never bad at anything, sports, school. And then all of a sudden you take all those people and all of a sudden, statistically, half of them have to be average or below average. And that's kind of a thing you have to kind of get behind, right? I mean, at some point you realize that there are just some people who do stuff better than you and you can't be the best at anything anymore. And that's okay. I mean, not everyone can be, Superman at, in every sort of aspect of medicine. But that's fine. And one thing Dr. Loomis told me that I wish I would have known as when I was younger was, I think a lot of times people, when they're applying or they want something, they want a research position, they want, they want to match, go to this med school, they want to match this residency. Something he always told me, and I've kind of run with this is, you don't win the game by having the best, pedigree. You don't win the game by making the most money. You don't win the game by having the best and most prestigious fellowship. And so you have bragging rights to your friends. You win the game by being happy. And I feel like a lot of those things, they think you make us happy and they really don't, I think a lot of times, you say, oh, I want to go to Harvard Medical School. I want to go to Johns Hopkins Medical School because that's going to make me happy. And I feel like a lot of times that's not really what you probably want. That's what you think you want. It's probably what you've been told, it's kind of this, it's built up in your head, and it's really not. I've met a lot of happy people from other medical schools who were from other countries who love being here. I've met a lot of people from a lot of prestigious areas, or they had really nice pedigrees and they weren't too happy. At the end of the day, sure, on paper, they'd say, oh, I have all this XYZ, but when they go home at night, the only person who has to get up and at the end of the day and look at themselves in the mirror is you. So if you are wanting to do a certain field of medicine, or you want to go to a certain school for anyone other than you, I would say that's probably a surefire way to burn out and not be happy. The only way you're going to be happy is by doing what you want to do. If that means you want to do pediatrics in South Dakota, more power to you. If that truly means for you, you want to go to New York City and live in a big city, and great, do it. I think a lot of times, a lot of med students let other students get in their heads. I know I did. I'd see what my other friends were doing, other students were doing. I'd hear, through the grapevine and whispers. And I'd say, oh, they're doing XYZ, like maybe I should be doing that. And I think what I found at this point, after like watching, 3 and change years of change and improvement, I would say the biggest thing is it's not always how much you're studying, it's how you're studying. And some people rely on lecture and some people do not. I personally was a lecture goer mostly in undergrad. And then I got to medical school, and then I said, I can't do this anymore. And you just kind of have to get over this anxiety of, I'm just going to do something maybe a little unorthodox, or I'm going to do something different than what my study group does or what my friends do. But like I said, medical school is more individualistic. You're putting in a lot of hours in the classroom. You're spending a lot of money to be there. Not like undergrad, there's a lot of group projects and stuff like that. There's really none of that in med school. Per class, most of your grades are probably 3 exams. You have 300 questions. You have 300 multiple choice questions to show what you know in 6 weeks. There's not a paper or a group project or a presentation to give in these classes, right? The only person who's going to be able to take the exam when it opens up is you. There's no lifelines, there's no phone a friend, there's no double dip. The only person who's staring at the screen is you, and you have no help. So I would say have friends. Obviously, you need a support system outside of medicine, but it's more individualistic. You really got to ask yourself, what works for me. If that my friends don't agree with me, that's fine. But like, again, I'm the one taking the exam, they're taking their own exam, and we're all doing our own thing. I would also recommend getting friends outside medicine. I definitely think it's not probably healthy to only have people you hang out with that are in medicine. I see that a lot seemingly still. I feel like it's very easy, especially if you're in a big school, big campus, all your friends are made up of people in your class. I would recommend against that. I know obviously once you get out of undergrad, it becomes kind of harder to make new friends. Obviously undergrad is very easy. Everyone's the same age. Everyone has class together. But if you can, great way to make friends, when you're post undergrad, outside school would be like if you rock climb, join a gym, or go to a workout class and meet people there, or yoga. I don't know, whatever you guys do. So whatever you want to do, I would say join something like that and run with it and try to meet people your own age, the 23, 24 era, where you could talk to and make friends with. And trust me, it's refreshing to not talk about medicine 24/7. It's very easy to slip back in when I still do this. This is something that you'll see when you're in med school, is that it's very easy when, let's say, you have your med school friends with you, and then there are some people not in medicine. You see it all the time. You see people, it's oil and water. The medicine people group together and they talk about the cases they saw in the hospital that week, or they saw, what surgery they saw. And then the non-medical people are just kind of off to the side, kind of not knowing what's going on. So I'm still guilty of that. It's still very, very easy to slip into. But I'd still recommend, get friends outside medicine. In terms of just applications, applying, things like that, like I said, obviously you probably heard it, and if you haven't, you should. The most important thing you could probably do for your application is get a nice GPA, do well in the MCAT. For better or for worse, it's like this for residency. Your application is pretty much how you look on paper, and how you look on paper is going to be those 2 things, along with a personal statement. But those are 2 things you can control well, right? You can take an exam and you can control how you do. It's dependent on you and you alone. So my recommendations, I did Kaplan, I did MCAT, the books, which I still have, in my understanding. Honestly, I would not do Kaplan again. If I were going back, again, like I said, this is one man's opinion. This is just what I did. If I went back and could do it all over again, I wouldn't have studied with the Kaplan books. My understanding is they have UWorld for MCAT now. which I heard is excellent. We use it all the time for our board exams in medical school. It's the gold standard for how we study, and from my understanding, it's pretty much the gold standard now for practice questions. Definitely would do it. It's worth buying. It's expensive, but it's worth the money. You pay for it. If cost is still prohibitive, maybe ask for a birthday gift or Christmas gift, a year-old, 3 to 6 month subscription would be more than sufficient. You probably have heard of Aki, which I heard is now seeping down into the undergrad world. Aki also started in medicine. It's kind of working its way down. I studied Aki a lot in medicine. My understanding is it's not as good for the MCAT, but if you're a flashcard learner, if you like, doing that sort of thing, I'd recommend getting very good at it. There's a lot of add-ons to it. There's kind of a whole subculture with Aki and those flashcards. Definitely look into that. There's a big user guide on it. Worth spending the time, the 5-10 hours it takes to really figure it out and get good at it. Other than that, obviously you just got to do well in your classes. I'd recommend doing all the practice exams the AAMC puts on. I think there's like 4 or 5 now. When I was taking the MCAT, it was only the 3rd year. We only had 2. Now that there's 4 or 5, they can be expensive again, but I've come to determine that this whole thing's expensive. So I guess it's just kind of a drop in the bucket at that point. In terms of gap years, that's another common question I get asked. I was a quote unquote traditional student. I graduated in 2018 in the spring, and I started med school that fall and fall of 2018. The average age to start medical school now is 24. The traditional student is kind of dying just because of how competitive it's getting. I think last statistic I read is it's now more common to have at least 1 gap year than not. And I was someone who was like, no, I don't want any gap years. I just want to go straight in. But looking back, when I started med school, I was 22 years old. I was fresh out of college. I was probably too immature to be there, to be honest. I wanted to start med school. I was still young, really immature. I wanted to be honest, go to the bars, not study, not do anything that would help me, learn medicine, things that you can't be doing and shouldn't be doing often. I wanted to do. So I think one thing about a gap year is, a lot of people who had gap years were more mature. They'd already gotten out of their system. They had maybe lived 1 or 2 years, worked a job, volunteered, did whatever. Scribed is a common one. They did their thing and they enjoyed, their early 20s. And when they started med school at 23 or 24, they were ready to get to work and hit the ground running. Whereas maybe someone like me and there were some others, maybe we were not, we were still kind of in college mode. And there was definitely a long, painful switch to make to kind of a more professional, more dedicated student that wasn't probably ready yet for. I get asked about the MD-MBA thing. I was a special COVID case when I was going through in 2020 at the end of my 2nd year. COVID happened, and MD-MBA was actually something I considered at the beginning of med school. Didn't do it, and then when COVID hit, they reopened it back up for all of us. And on the advice of Dr. Loomis, who actually said, "I think you should do it," I did. And that's one thing I would do again, at least for me. I thought it was great. I had a good year. I got to leave medicine for a year, avoid COVID, get recharged. And then when I went back, I definitely had a bigger appreciation for medicine. I saw medicine maybe a little differently. I think the biggest thing I gathered from that was my capstone project was based on free and reduced clinics. We were looking at operations and flow. How can we, make it cheaper? How can we make it more efficient to see more patients? That's a passion area I've kind of, liked now as I got older is, free clinics, not necessarily, how do we make them cheaper, but, how can we possibly get more people through in a day? They say time's money. That's kind of how it is. So maybe instead of cutting costs, how can we cut down time wasted? Less time wasted means more patients seen, means more people helped. So it's become a small area that I kind of like. It's going to be on my residency app. It's a big part, that capstone project. So I'm guessing I'll get asked about it a lot, and it'll be a good talking point for me. I had a friend doing MD and PH, Master of Public Health. She liked it. She had a good time. She'd say similar things to me. I have no regrets about doing it. Obviously, it's another probably 20 grand, which if you're doing the math in your head, medical school is really expensive. I think it's like 37 grand for just tuition alone in Indiana if you're an Indiana resident. It doesn't even count room, living. I think for financial anxiety, I kind of got over that. I just kind of shrug my shoulders and don't look at the number at the end of the day. I know it's there, but I plan on being around a long time. So I plan on paying that off. I plan on having no problems paying it off. I've yet to meet one doctor who struggled to pay off their loans. So if finances is, anxiety inducing for you, I would say I've met a lot of doctors and not a single one hadn't done it. So pretty good track record. I'd say if it's undefeated, must mean something. I like to ask a couple questions or answer a couple questions. I like a little Q&A. If anyone has any, I'm sure, don't be shy. If you are a little shy, I'll put my email on the board and you can shoot me an email later. Does anyone have any questions or burning things they really want to ask about, applications, my time at Purdue, my time at med school? There we go. There we go. Both of you guys can both go.
Speak up a little bit.
Can you consider the MBA the first time? What was it?
Well, it wouldn't have been offered to me if COVID never hit, right? So I guess the first time, right, when I was applying and got in, they have all the programs and I looked at it and thought about it and then didn't do it. I think the first time was there was a little interest, I was actually never someone who really had a passion for medicine, to be honest. I kind of liked it, but there's definitely some people who kind of eat, sleep, breathe it. I'm definitely not in that camp. I never was and probably never will be. So I looked at that saying oh, if I ever want to leave clinical medicine, this would be a great, opportunity. This is a way to step out from clinical medicine, classic medicine, just leave it entirely. The strange thing is that when I did it on my year, I actually gained a better appreciation for clinical medicine. It had the opposite effect, being away from it for about a year actually showed me, oh yeah, this is actually, I was shortchanging this. I like it more. I can still see myself, to be honest, leaving clinical medicine one day, but I have no short-term plans, of leaving, classical medicine in the next 10 years. Definitely gonna apply for residency, definitely want to do it, definitely want to practice. I can't see myself leaving anytime soon. But like I said, life expectancy is 80 years old. I plan on living to 100. So I got a long life to live. I got a lot of things I want to do. So maybe down the line when I'm old and gray, I'm 55, maybe I will leave and do something else and, do my thing. Great question. Excellent question. And excellent that you have someone actually getting those kind of involved. I did a lot of soup kitchens and food banking, volunteering. So I did a lot of that. That is an area that was near to my heart. I did a lot growing up as a child, when I was 10, 11, 12 years old. I continued on through high school. And then that's something I like doing. Something I still like doing. I think it's nice to serve a meal for somebody else and talk to them and just learn about them. I like that sort of thing. I think it's great. It shows that, you're volunteering 4 or 5 hours. And what your president had said earlier, longitudinal volunteering is all better, right? If you've done something for 2 years, once a week, 2 hours, just even an hour, once a week for 2 years, that shows dedication for 2 years that you were dedicated to a certain cause and you really liked it. Anyone can fake, 2 days of 8-hour activity, or you can fake that easy. It's really hard to fake, 2 years of longitudinal volunteering. So it shows 1, you're dedicated, 2, you get a lot of hours, 3, you're committed to a cause. So I would say if you're going to choose between multiple different little activities or one longitudinal activity, I think one longitudinal activity probably looks better. So for internal medicine, which is what I'm applying, there are, I think, 650 hospitals across the country to look at. So basically, you just have, it's just like applying for med school. You go on the AMC website, instead of doing pre-med into med school, you just do residency. You click on that tab, use your same exact ID, and then you just fill out your personal statement again, letters of recommendation, transcript. It's pretty much very similar to applying to medical school, except you do your med school things. You put your med school transcript in, your med school scores, letters of rec, and your resume / CV in the computer. And then there's something called residency finder. If you're applying for med school, it's called the MSAR. It basically shows you all the schools and their kind of average applicant, what they look like in terms of scores and how many research activities they've done. So you get kind of an idea using this. And so I'm just I like Midwest, so I'm applying pretty much in the Midwest, maybe some East. So you can filter by region, by state. And then I'll say, oh, these programs, I'm pretty competitive for all these programs. I like, Louisville's a city, so I'll apply Louisville's program. I like, I like Philly, so I'll apply Temple. I'm right, kind of with, in their range of applicants, so I'll apply to them. And then it's the same thing with medical school, except there's no secondary. You just kind of wait on an interview invite, which is nice because you don't have to keep filling out applications again after filling out application. So a little easier, no secondary.
Thank you, John, for speaking. Really pleasure to have you. Then we'll have a little bit of time to ask questions at the end of this. But yeah, thanks, Sean. Dr. Gregory Loomis is the current Tippecanoe County Health Officer. He's also IU School of Medicine assistant professor of neurological surgery, and he has awesome stories to tell. So thanks for coming, Dr. Loomis.
Don't let me forget my phone. Thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate it. One thing I will say is that John, from day one, I had him as a first year medical student, underestimated his abilities. I talked to many things. Here's a picture of he and I breaking into a candy machine. For that.
We did not give, we spent about $5 an hour.
He decided that one of his classmates was on the lookout, building guys, he and I vandalized the machine. So I always said to the students that, as a neurosurgeon, I'm not a neurologist. You don't ever confuse that, especially if you're around a neurosurgeon. People ask, what's the difference between a neurosurgeon and a neurologist? And does anybody have a parent that's a doctor in the audience? What do they do? Family practice? Well, a neurologist kind of diagnoses sometimes. They have these differential diagnoses that are this long. A neurosurgeon looks around, sees a box, takes it out. So there's these guys over a city in a hot air balloon, with fog, and they can't see anything except this tall building sticking to the fog. So they navigate the balloon over and they look down, and there's a guy in a white coat standing on top of the building. So they look down and they say, "Sir, can you tell us where we are?" They can't see me. And the guy, without hesitating, looks up and says, "You're up there." And the guy in the balloon turns to the other guy and says, "He must be a neurologist." "How do you know that?" He said, "He answered quickly, and he was exactly right, and there's nothing we can do with this information." So that's kind of the difference between a neurosurgeon and a neurologist. But one of the things that John did was underestimate himself. He was a top-notch student, and he has an incredible mind. We all got into an argument once, because this was during COVID, so I would sneak food in because we weren't even supposed to be on the campus. But to keep the class together, usually on Saturdays and Sundays, I would try to sneak pizza and food when we're sitting around. And we're all doing kind of trivia stuff, and we all got into an argument about presidents. I don't know which one, even the only one that got it right, but that's good. He's from Indiana, grew up in Indianapolis.
Oh, it's Harrison.
Benjamin Harris. And we all saying, no, he's not from Indiana, until John said, yes, he is. And he stuck by his guns. I actually knew it. I agreed with everybody else. I wanted to see whether he could stick to his guns. He did. We all looked at, everybody looked at that and they're like, but he stuck to his guns. And that tells me a lot about students sticking to their guns, sticking to what they believe in to be true. And when John said you're used to being wrong, no, you get used to being less right. But when you get into medical school, you did something right to get there. So I always encourage students to think about, why they're not quite right, but they're less wrong. And that's kind of what you have to do your whole life. You have to be less wrong. And that's why we have something called a differential diagnosis. Where we go through it could be this, it could be that, it could be this, it could be that. It could be this, it's the top of the list, it's the most likely. We have to prove for ourselves that it's not that by including other things. But John was a top-notch student. I'm glad he took the year off, not for any other reason. It was a great opportunity. I mean, didn't they cut the tuition by 50%?
Yeah, that was part of the deal. Was they actually had sliced off a sizable chunk of tuition that year. So it was not like I paid all year medical tuition like half of what. So about 4.5 years tuition. That's a lot. So that was part of the deal.
Yeah, it was a great deal. Those who did the MBA or the Masters of Public Health were, phenomenal. I mean, they got a great deal that year, and everybody did really well. But I'm going to talk about a couple of things. I want to follow up with the young lady's question back there about volunteering. I am the health officer for Tippecanoe County. I'm also the health officer for District 4, which is all the counties around us to the northeast, all the way from Lake County all the way down. Only because we have the largest health department as part of the state, and I have 30 people that work for me in all different venues. We have a whole nursing program, an engineering program, It's all under the health department. We do vaccines and all that. But if anybody ever wants to volunteer, we also have what's called a FEMA program, which is the fetal infant mortality rate, which is sky high in our district. And I've been, one of my prime goals is to lower that number. Helping with the vaccination clinic, we need people to help with that. Anytime you want to do any volunteering, we are more than happy to offer you a position. But yeah, I think you definitely have to volunteer. That's a really key thing to see. And I like what John did with his MBA, is looking at developing care to indigent people. I'm really into that as well. I always have been. And I actually got accepted in Harvard Medical School, but when I moved to Villanova, I'm undergraduate in chemical engineering. We have a basketball. And anyway, I got accepted to Harvard, and I accepted Penn State or Penn and Jefferson and Temple. I chose Albany Medical School because my family was up there. I'd been in the military before I went to college, let alone medical school. I was in the tail end of Vietnam. And so I wanted to be near my family just to be away for so long. So I accepted Albany, and when I got up there, 6 months later, my family moved to Florida. But am I glad? Yeah, I'm very glad. I enjoyed it. So you don't have to always be, looking to be number one, because medical school, all of you are smart people that are thinking about applying. And, you get to medical school and the cream rises to the top. So now you're in the top 0.5% of the smartest graduate students in the country. Somebody's got to be number one, somebody's got to be number 5, somebody's got to be number 24. But when you graduate, you're all called the same thing, doctor. And that's important. It's not where you stand in class, it's not how much you study, it's the kind of person you are. I remember when these guys were in anatomy lab when I first started, I walked in and there was this, I wore a Hawaiian shirt like the instructor, Jim Walker, and I would look at each other and like, oh my God, you wear a Hawaiian shirt. And one of his classmates, Chelsea Wallace, that tall, maybe Chelsea, she's an ENT now, she's in ear, nose, and throat, first year resident. They introduced me as Dr. Loomis, neurosurgeon, and so she said, hey, you're a big shot neurosurgeon, come over here, help us dissect. So you guys are doing the arm and the brachial plexus at the time. And so I went over and said, do you have any words of wisdom, for us as we're starting our career? And I looked at her and said, be kind. Just be kind. Goes a long way as a doctor. And usually neurosurgeons like myself are usually considered real assholes, very, uppity and all this other stuff. And yes, I could be like that if I had to, but I'm never that way. And that's the whole thing. I knew my wife's a nursing professor. Is there a freshman nursing student in here? My wife, Ann Loomis, Dr. Loomis.
Yeah.
She's the Dr. Loomis. I'm like, I don't even have the title that from. So, but yeah, so she said there were a couple of her freshman students that coming to this class. I will tell you, mention your name, and I'll tell her. We have about 175 in the class.
I'm actually a junior, but.
Oh, you're junior?
Yeah, we all did, so.
Okay, well then I don't have to say anymore. And you don't have to be the brightest, you just have to be good at what you do, and you have to be focused. Truthfully, John, how much of the first 2 years of medical school do you remember? How much of
That's a good question. I get that a lot. I actually had a conversation with class because I was working nights this last week, and I was at our net for a month. I was on nights, and I saw you scribe. I saw one of your coworkers, and she was in anatomy. They were learning very obscure anatomy in the back. Not only like muscle, like nerves, the lumbar plexus. I think she was on. And I was like, I don't remember any of this. And then I get, I'll do it. I don't remember much about biochem either. I was a biochem major, Hervey hydrogenase. Remember that? I don't really remember that enzyme somewhere in there. I don't remember, a lot of times it's not specific. I think you don't remember details, and you probably remember big picture, right? I remember like, we're talking about the metabolic cycle, the metabolic cycle, typically acidotic. So we talk about chemistry of the blood, that's something, I know that very easily. But if you ask me to go from glucose to, ATP all the way through, I probably could do it.
I would hope not. I'm 68 years old, and said 55 years old, so I didn't take that kind of. But John and I have the same birthday, and he told me that any student has the same birthday as I do. I moved to the day after, 2 years later or something. And nobody can have the same birthday. Tragically, he has the same birthday as that. Quite a few years left. But the point I'm trying to make is that really the first 2 years of medical school are part of training your mind to think in a certain way. Because for those of you who think that you're smart enough to walk into medical school, if you don't study undergrad, you walk into medical school not having studied, good luck on that. Okay? I have a partial photographic memory and I had to study. It really pissed off my classmates tremendously to remember everything. But again, applying it is a whole different thing. It's a whole different venue. You have students that come to medical school that are incredible students. I had one student 2 years ago that was like sitting there, grading, and I looked at the notes and I was like, my grade is atrocious. How are you going to read this? And she was really recopying my notes. Oh, no, it's pretty fast. You have no time to do that. So all of the study techniques that you've learned in undergrad, even though you're all good students, are going to be different when you get to medical school. You have to rethink everything. Part of that is kind of walking left and right. It's staggered at the first go out to that first anatomy test, and you finally figure it out. And then things become easier and easier. When you get into a routine, John could not say that you get into a routine, you make sure you study certain hours, you got to eat right, you have to exercise, you just have to find some way to get some exercise. When I was in medical school, I held up another class, as president of the class. I did now and then because I didn't help at the time, but I never really, I found more enjoyment not talking about medicine 20 years. Because when you read things and remember them, like I can even remember where I was when I read it. So, that 24/7 is just too much to handle. So I always hung around with people who weren't in medicine. It seemed to be a much better kind of lifestyle. So how did I get here? Well, I practiced in Evansville for about 30 years, and my wife Ann, who graduated from Purdue, ran into the old dean of the nursing school at Congress about 6 years ago. And my wife was finishing her PhD, so she came up here, interviewed, and took the job up here. And I thought, well, we have this property in California that we've been wanting to build on for about 10 years now. So that's been put on hold because I had promised her that she would give 5 years. Now, so anyway, so during the first month or two I was here, they heard that there was a neurosurgeon running around the community with no adult supervision. So they got me to the medical school, and I was there until last year working with all the students. And I had a really good time. It was different for me. I'd been in medical school 40 years before that, and the only thing we had in common was anatomy. So I'm sitting next to one of the students, and they're talking about first aid. It's this book, First Aid. I said, surely we're learning more than first aid in medical school. And I found out that it was a book to review for step 1 boards, national boards. Nobody studied for step 1, step 2, step 3. We call it part 1, part 2, and part 3. You just kind of knew you passed part 1 because they say, hey, it's time to take part 2. And when part 2 was over at the end of your internship, it said part 3, and that was it. That was really simple stuff. No one studied. And I found out that these guys, their whole career, kind of hinged on this step 1. So I thought, well, I can do this test. So I spent between 2 years, I spent $8,000 of my own money and bought every resource. And went through every single resource and did questions with these guys. Every weekend we did questions. So I figured out how to do the test. I made these review sheets for them. And they seemed to work pretty well. And they're still in use at the medical school now. But we did beat the test. The first time I took it cold without even opening a book, I got like a 234. That wasn't good enough to be a neurosurgeon. I sure as hell wasn't going to give the money back. So I read Robbins to college, cover to cover. And my score just on that book alone, 230 something to 255. And then I went ahead and kind of fine-tuned everything. I ended up like 280 or something, 279 or 280. I thought I'm done. So I know kind of the test, I know the format, how it is, I know the thinking, how you have to do that. And it's really, I would see these questions and say, oh, there's no way a Christian medical student will figure that out. They don't have enough base knowledge. So the first 2 years of medical school are about developing a foundation. It doesn't have to be the strongest foundation. It's just got to be a foundation of how you think and how you integrate the material. It's all about integration, not about taking the information and puking it back out. Okay? It's about integrating stuff. That's all they ask. But one thing I found pretty interesting in teaching, trying to get students to think that way early on, quicker than we were used to doing, because before I came, I think we were like 6th in the state out of 9 schools. And after the first year, second year, third year, fourth year, we were #1 in the state across the board, first and second year. So it made a huge difference on getting the students to think early on, but I was the only neurosurgeon system teaching. So it was a little bit different. Nobody else had it. It was kind of like, why was he there, not here? Wait. So it was a different way of kind of approaching academics and approaching how students think. But different than undergrad, totally different. Does anybody have any questions, Rob? I wanted to end, I have a couple more things. Does anybody have any questions on what I said so far? I kind of want to throw a bunch of stuff at you at once. Okay, so I'm going to continue on. So looking at questions. The hardest thing that I think you have to do for medical school is have a passion. How many people are in love with somebody? Not really. I had a class of 128. Everybody that was married the first day of medical school either divorced. One was a Mormon couple. And they get divorced. So it's really, really, really hard. Okay, it's really hard. Especially if the other one doesn't die. Because they can't, it's like trying to explain the feeling of riding a bicycle. You read it until my mother died about 7 years ago. She could never figure out, look, you graduated from medical school. Why did you do all those years before you graduated yet? You know, they didn't understand. So it's really hard to get people to understand. And I'm not saying you can't be successful. You're in love, or you're married, or your religion's whatever. But it's very, very difficult to have a relationship that close because you just can't partially do it. It's very hard. That's number one. Number two is to basically think about what you want to do with your life early on as a physician. You don't have to decide day one that you want to be a neurosurgeon. Because I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was destined to cardiothoracic surgery, and the last elective that I had in medical school, I did neurosurgery to fill a month block and fill madly in love. And that's how I ended up being a neurosurgeon. But it's about passion. You have to have a passion for medical school. You have to have a passion for being a doctor. Okay? You have to have a passion for giving back. You have to have a passion for being kind to people and listen, even when you're completely, totally exhausted. Nothing about to give, you have to give. That's the hard one. If you have certain ideologies, whether they be religious or whatever, leave them in the garage when you put your stethoscope around your neck. I don't care whether it's right-wing Christianity or left-wing Christianity, or Muslim or Jewish or whatever, or atheist, you leave them in the garage when you put the stethoscope around your neck. You do not judge other people. You take care of them. Right now, we have about 10 cases of monkeypox in the county, and I see these patients pretty regularly. And we have 2 Hispanic gentlemen, and they live in a trailer with 2 other Hispanic gentlemen. The other 2 Hispanic gentlemen won't come in to be treated because they're afraid they're going to be deported. And I said, I'm not in the deporting business. I'm in the health business. I will drive to your trailer and I will give them the monkeypox vaccine myself. I took it. I took it as a health officer to show people this is not a gay disease. It is not an African disease. It's an infectious disease. So I did it as an example to show people that it's safe. Okay? So you have to do those kind of things. And I said to them, I don't care if you come in and you sign up as Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck. I said, I want to treat you, not deport you. So they're coming in tomorrow. It works, and it just works. That's how you have to think about those kind of things. As far as the health officer job goes, when I resigned from the medical school last year, I was going to go back to what I did really, really well. It's just nothing. I'm really good at doing nothing. Okay? I love to read. I love to write. So I write poetry. I write fiction. And I just love doing that stuff. But what happened was I was kind of asked by the community, both of our mayors, city commissioners, a good friend of mine, Dr. Bob Hagan, who just died recently, but I know him for 30 years, called me in October last year and asked if I would please take this job. And I said no to everybody. And when I finally said yes, was because the staff and my wife and I worked at a clinic giving shots for 2.5 years, called me at home and said, Loomis, will you please help us out? When people ask you that are on the front lines, you have to give back. So that's how I ended up this. Not that I wanted it. But I did it because people that are out front trying to do this have to do it. That's all I know to tell them. Anybody have any questions yet? So what, I'll get away from medical school for this year, so yeah. go ahead.
So I was kind of assuming that, in med school, you went to med school on a certain track, is that only really like, but you said you decided in your last year of med school, you actually wanted to, you go more into like.
Yeah, good question. Thank you. Yeah, you know, you go into medical school thinking you have an idea of what you want to be. Most people that I know over the years, speaking about myself and about all my classmates, med students, and IUSM, a lot of change their mind. I just took on the way over here. I talked to a fourth-year student who's doing, no, she's third year this year. She's doing a rotation in neonatal ICU down at IU. And she is hell bent on being an ophthalmologist. So she called me on the way over here. Loomis, I just love this. I just want to take care of her. She's like, okay, Sophia, stop. Sophia Patel. She's like, you know, and she's like, I love him. I said, well, you know, why don't you think about maybe you know, sub-I, it's kind of like an acting internship. No, I have to be an ophthalmologist. I just love these kids. That's how it happens sometimes. That's how it happens. So you have to keep an open mind because you know, they say the love of your life passes you on the hallway or campus 10 times a day. You don't recognize it. The deal of a lifetime comes around multiple times a day that you don't recognize. Just be open to it. So don't go into med school with a closed mind. Go into medical school with an open mind to be, you know, you've had guys bigger than me, tougher than me, might be an orthopedic surgeon. You'd love to break bone, do things, lose a lot of blood and all this, you know, during the procedure. And they turn out to be pediatricians. And so it's becoming.
Yeah, actually, that's the thing I want to say that I forgot to say. I wanted to keep originally, I like kid class. But I was my pediatrician the third year, and I was doing a well child visit one week, and I had my hand, hey buddy, and he just yaps slowly with me. Okay, we're gonna give you back to mom and dad, and I think that so what he said, Brian, I think a lot of times you change your mind. You don't really know until you don't really know what you're going to actually do day in, day out for 8 hours a day. That's why we're going
Yeah, my Pete's first rotation in third year medical school, he puked all over. But some people say, oh, he's really sick, like a problem. Yeah. So that's kind of how I would look at it. Keep an open mind. You know, be an individual, be your own self, develop your inner strength. You know, and I've said this multiple times besides, you know, what I said to John and his classmates and classmates all and down, not only be kind, but to, you know, have a heart, be passionate, all this. One thing I will say is be challenged by adversity. Don't be threatened by it. Too many of you get threatened by adversity. Oh my God, I got 10 questions right on that test. It doesn't matter. You be challenged by it. Do better the next time. If you fold like a bad hand, that's how people are weeded out of medical school. The first go round, it's not who ends up applying. It's people that probably would make really good doctors folded because they were threatened by adversity rather than challenged. So I would say be challenged by adversity, not threatened. Take this word want out of your vocabulary for the rest of this evening and the rest of your life. I don't want to be a doctor. I intend on being a doctor. Intend, when you use the word intend, show somebody like me that you've got a direction and a mindset that you'll achieve. So you intend to do something. There's a big difference. I want to go to Florida. Well, I intend to go to Florida. Not now, the hurricanes, you get Tampa, get out. We had a house right there on the point and sold it about 5 years ago. I was like, yes. But anyway, that's one of the things. Challenged by adversity, not threatened by adversity. Attention, not one. Desire, passion, and being kind. That's what makes a good physician. I've been a doctor for 40 years. But so when John's sitting here 5 times saying, I have my whole life ahead of me, I'm like, looking and I see the light at the end of the tunnel. It's probably not heaven. My life is not on the train. You have to think in those terms. And I'll put my email up here for you guys too. So as health officer, I take care of all. I can pull your records. I know everything about your arm, which I get it's amazing. power I had. One little square in Indiana, if I step out, I'm like naked, so I jump back in. It's in the Canoe County, it's amazing what the health officer has access to. And you can't hold anything back because of HIPAA. So I say, what's your name? Or now I'm more than records. So I work closely with Purdue, we set up the COVID issues, and we're finishing up on the monkeypox problems with Purdue as usual, has no problems. Nobody gets drunk at Purdue, nobody gets pregnant at Purdue, nobody overdoses at Purdue, nobody gets monkeypox at Purdue. So, but we are working in those avenues as well. So, and then work with the county, we work with children and adults and, different disease processes, and we keep tabs on our STIs and sexually transmitted infections. And, which we have a lot of in this county. So we got a state called this last week and we said, what is it that you, Dr. Loomis, you're District 4 and we put you in charge of this whole district? You have more STIs than any other district in the state. Must be a great area to have sex. I don't know. I mean, too much a logical thing to say, 200 people on the call, everybody sitting there, thumbs up and all this other stuff. Not up to District 4, we have plenty of sex. I noticed on Wednesday and Friday, the lines on the SBE clinic side kind of like, and you all wear your Purdue sweatshirts. Live long and perspire, or whatever. So we've got a couple minutes left. Does anybody have any questions for John and I? You speak up. I really am old. I'm already behind. What I wanted to do. I'm sorry for your question.
Like when you finish doing the grad, like for example, like me on actually that's the study. I have a lot of time. That's like I started out like medical like about it.
About what's next year.
Yeah.
I guess I don't want to knock the issue, but if you don't develop a passion, it's going to be really hard. One of the students that's a year behind, very close to me, she was a Barron Scholar. Anybody a Barron Scholar? You know what a Barron Scholar is? They get everything paid for. All of their tuition free, they get a stipend, they go to medical school, all of it paid for free, no payback. After 2 years of medical school, she doesn't want to be a doctor. She and I had lunch. So, but I knew from the very first year, so it's not because mom and dad wants to be a doctor. I'm from New York. I'm American Indian. I'm from New York, and one of my classmates was a Jewish guy, and his parents always pushed him to be a doctor. Son of a doctor, son of a doctor. He walked across the stage, got his diploma, he went to work for the post office. He never did an internship. I wouldn't communicate back and forth from the one place. He's the happiest guy in the world. So we have questions.
More like a neurosurgeon question, but how do
You have good insurance? I'm only kidding, that's all.
but how do you mentally feel when you're on the operating table, someone passes you in and the point is, how do you handle that emotion?
Great question. There's not a doctor alive who will tell you he or she was not instrumental in killing somebody during the training. That happened to me. I was a fourth-year neurosurgical resident, and I was doing a brain tumor on something right near the top of the big thing from the whole length of your head called sagittal sinus. Right, certain names of the brain are called sinuses, not like the carrying a lot of blood. And bleeding was somewhat, busy, steady, and all of a sudden, anesthesiologist, I heard, you always hear the monitor EKG, all of a sudden, and what had happened was the blood loss was so high that he died. I still remember that case yesterday. So you remember those things, but to answer your question another way, I've had many people die. No question. It's hard to say to stop something. They have a massive brain injury or tumor. or 2 weeks, you know, and you get a little frustrated, you get. You accept that, you realize, you know. You don't want to eat, you can say all the certain three, no, you go in with the confidence, the difference between your ego and. So when you feel confident, you do the best job you can do, all the trainings you got, I've done hundreds of trainings. And you know, we can just with a certain confidence. You get the job done. Neurosurgery, I hate to say this to you, is 99% boredom and 1% sheer panic. It really is a job. But yes, you always have. That's not what I think. Before I would do a major brain surgery, I would be running through my work. I work out every morning. John knows I get up about 3:30 every morning, which I've done for 40 years of pain for a couple hours. I work out. Now I'd be running through the case in my brain over and over. It's not NBCs over and over. All the things you have. We had fiction, three-dimensional anatomy, what I was working. Running over and over. Or much. Yeah. Anybody else? Yes. One second.
You talked about being a doctor for 40 years, and then John also talked about training his mom in school. So my question, I guess, is burnout, and you hear about it being inevitable with med students.
Yeah, I'll answer this one real quick, so I don't want to take too much time. Well, first of all, some of you know my wife. She's been my best. She's the only woman I've ever been with that wants me to be a better person. So she is somebody that's so special to me that she offered a lot. So I was really lucky to have a partner who knew how to handle it. Okay? That's number one. Number two is I love Scotch. I'm but number two is you've just got to you can't let yourself be too honest. You have to be able to know that there's an old movie, Clint Eastwood movie called Dirty Harry. Man's got to know his limitations. The woman has to know her limitations. And you can't exceed those. You've got to stay within those. That's a very well wisdom. And you use people around you. You know, that's why I have to be friends with you. Even today, most of my friends with you do fun things. You don't have to think about next. You get too involved in things, you get dragged in. That's burnout. Right now, it's really, really hard. But having a partner that makes you feel really good about yourself and about situations where they go bad makes all the difference. So I truly love the way they don't tell them that.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr.
Thank you, guys. And again, thank you for coming and listening to me talk and listening to John. And again, John is a great student. He's going to be a spectacular doctor because he's kind. Okay. So I'm going to put my G. Loomis at Tippecanoe. That's the good thing about being the health officer. I finally learned how to spell Tippecanoe. .in.gov. And I will be happy to just remind me who you were, and I will be happy to get back to you if you're interested in a volunteering opportunity down there. Definitely look.
Thank you so much.
Buddy, excuse, do you have any questions? Believe that we take around for a couple minutes, so just let's go. If you were interested in signing up for the Narcan training, I have the updated QR code, so you can just come stop by and I'll show you it.
Are we doing that? Yeah, we do it too. The nurses too. Did you guys have Narcan training yet?
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Let me do it while you guys.
Yeah. Hi, Dr. Flores. I'm right
With you.
Yeah.
Oh, well, this is my wife's flat.
Oh.
Thank you so much for watching. Tell your wife that she's.
Hopefully we're all actually not. They were like, oh.
She should.
They're fine.
Hey, guys.
Hi.
Hey, guys.
Hi.
You're done. Have any questions?
Hi.